Hi, everybody. This is Angel Arts, and Colin. Colin is joining me because we wanted to kind of talk about and review Netflix, unique to Netflix series, the show Stranger Things. You may or may not have heard about it. It's actually relatively popular.
A lot of them, I would suspect a lot of them.
I think a lot of you probably have heard of Stranger Things. It's become really popular over the last month or so. But Colin, you actually saw it first.
I did. Other than music, my big and the children teaching, shows are my most important thing, and I love and consume as many quality ones as I can. And I hadn't really intended to watch Stranger Things, but a lot of people had said something, and it was supposed to be short, and so I decided to. And had you even heard of it at the time? I don't know. I think you had.
I didn't hear about it until after you started watching it. What exactly did they tell you that got you to start watching it?
Well, I am very much a person who will go based on authority. That doesn't mean that I agree with it, and there are many things in which I don't agree. But if ethos, pathos, and logos, in terms of persuasion, being convinced to watch something, ethos is someone's authority. So a lot of people who I respect and note were talking about it, and I try not to know that much about it once someone recommendable people recommend stuff. And so I had just known, and frankly, there was a kid element and a nostalgia element, which are usually up my alley anyway. So yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna start by going over things spoiler free. So dance around some of the major plot stuff, because I feel like this is the kind of show that it's really best for you to go in not knowing anything about it, really, like for the most part. But you know, we'll get into the more spoilery stuff like on the second half. But if for those of you who don't know what this show is about, without really telling you what it's about, it takes place in the early 80s, and it was filmed stylistically as if it was an actual show back in the 80s. Like, I think they used like a film filter or something to make it look old school, so that it and even the soundtrack itself, I'm not talking about the music within the actual like show, like actual real in the actual world itself, but like the presentation of the show had very catchy 80s like music. So it really took you back, especially if you grew up in the 80s. And as Colin mentioned, it has sort of a Goonies feel, because a good element of the plot revolves around this group of geeky, nerdy children. But it's not just the children, because there's a lot of other characters involved in the overall plot. And like you said, it was pretty short and sweet because only 8 episodes. It was only 8 episodes for season 1. And how would you describe the genre? How would you the genre of the show?
Well, I would say the genre. Well, I was going to say the genre is nostalgia, but I think that is true. I think it because you don't need to know the 80s that unbelievably well, or at a minimum, you don't need to have been born in the 80s. And I would imagine, now as me, I have shades of a little gray hair and getting older, I would be more in the age that would know those. But I didn't know all of them, but it doesn't really matter. If you've seen those films, or if you're just a connoisseur of film to begin with, or just like sci-fi, it's just pretty open. So it doesn't really require the specific films, but if you do, you'll be able to connect with it even more. So there's just so many entry points that it'd be hard pressed for someone, unless they didn't like any of those genres, to not like it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the one very specific thing I would add to that is it definitely has Goonies elements. That's literally one of the 3 main things. John Carpenter, the director of certain slasher stylistic films, who the Stranger Things title sequence is literally based off of. and the Goonies, but also I think very importantly, Stand by Me. And so it's not purely like kids going around and like joking around and having fun. It's has serious sort of moving dark elements, which to me made Stand by Me a superior movie, and but it's part of the whole experience and definitely, literally one of their influences.
Yeah.
But yeah,
because I know some people describe the show as sci-fi, and you have said that you don't particularly care for sci-fi that much.
the, I it's not one that I would naturally gravitate towards. I have things that I naturally gravitate towards, things that I'm sort of okay with, and things that I don't really like. But in any of those things, I'm open to them. Like, I don't like zombies and vampires generally, but I like The Walking Dead. Yes,
yeah.
Which is a really
That's
good thing
really
to say to this audience. I
Yes.
feel like that's such a but.
And I normally like happy and non-depressing things, and yet I like The Walking Dead.
Yeah, no, that's
So-
a fair point too. And yeah. So sci-fi, no, I am not against sci-fi. I mean, many of my favorite movies are sci-fi, but it's not something like
It's not your go-to.
it's not my go-to exactly.
Yeah,
Good description.
Yeah. So I guess again, without going into spoiler territory, what aspects of this show do you think were its strong points? What aspects of it, was it the characters? Was it the writing? Was it the cinematography? Like, what about it did you feel is merited, is the most merited things about the show?
That's a good question. I was going to glibly try to say in as many different languages as I can, the kids, like muchachos, that's what I know is Spanish really. The kids were, and not just because that is both through my job and through I like many coming of age films. So I do think the kids is the central one. But I think tone is the second most important thing, and that's my point of that. It sort of transcends both genre and background knowledge. So you really don't need to fully know all of those things to be able to appreciate it. And so because it's so, even if you don't know the tone, like if you're watching a good historical fiction, you don't necessarily need to know about the War of 1812 to have a War of 1812 novel or film just grab you, because you can tell, or at least, people who see things regularly or discerning taste, you can tell that this is really well done, that this feels like the War of 1812 or what War of 1812 movies would be like. And I just think the attention to detail, and I mean, if you go and research it, like the producers and the writers did do that, and that's what they love, but it comes through in, the cinematography and the song choices, and, from top to bottom, that this was, a labor of love, but a talented one at that.
Right. So we're going to start getting into more of the spoilery areas. So if you guys haven't seen the series, then you might want to stop here, do a little bit more research if you want to. But I wanted to start getting into the nitty-gritty of what about the show. So obviously, there are the story revolves around this city. One of the children, Will Byers, ends up disappearing, and there's these kids that are trying to find him, but then they run into this girl, 11, who has these mysterious powers. You've got the Chief Hopper, who's trying to solve the case. You have the family, the mom and the brother of Will Byers, and then you have, of course, the family of Mike, the main child character. And all of what I liked a lot about the plot is that there seem to be these separate groups, these separate mini stories, side stories happening, and then at the end they all come together, because each of them has a different piece of this puzzle, a different piece of this mystery, and it's not until the very end that they start putting all the pieces together. It's interesting because I think one of the favorite characters that people had in this show was Barb, believe it or not. Barb was a favorite character, and I heard that the fans liked her so much and were kind of upset at what ends up happening to her, that they were hoping to bring her back somehow somehow bring her back in season 2, and I think there's rumors that says that the writers are thinking of a way to somehow bring her back, but I have no idea what that could be.
Is that no longer rumors? That's official.
But it's no longer rumors that is official.
Oh, yeah,
that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
What do you think it is about Barb that people end up gravitating towards?
To be honest, no, and I don't. I think Barb is fine and good, and I think it's deserving of coming back. But I think Barb is coming back because the reason Barb wants them back. The reason people want Barb back so much is because Barb they thought was not going to come back, and it was kind of
You think it was a pity thing?
No. I think it was like a sort of self-sustaining meme, like, because people are like, we should bring back Barb, and that's like the new hip thing. Like, I mean, I think there is to a degree like an element of we want to be in on this sort of winky joke, like we're gonna take this character and make it into, we're gonna get her back, like, but they mean it, and there's sincerity behind it. But I do think the internet, I think, would back me up in this. There is, I think, to some extent, a like half joking trendiness to bringing back Barb, which fueled it.
Well, speaking of bringing people back, at the end of the series, at the end of the season, I was convinced that we haven't seen the last of 11. I was convinced that 11 is probably going to come back in some form, somehow, in the season 2. Do you agree?
I will take this. I will take various things that are on this desk, and I will consume them if 11 is not in season 2. I am 100. I mean, I haven't read anything like specifically like with Barb, but yes, I like the way that they sort of left it on a at least nominal cliffhanger. Whether she'll be back, but she'll be back.
I was a little. There were some parts of the very last episode, the ending of the last episode, that I was trying to understand, because there was the scene where you see Hopper, and remember, before you saw Hopper, he was going into that car of the science facility, like the science people were putting him in the car, and then the next time you see him, it's Christmas, and he goes into the woods and he puts a bowl of something, probably food, and Eggo waffles in the box. So what do you think that means?
I mean, that 11 is alive and he's helping her. I mean, I'm intrigued.
But do you think the science people told him that 11 is alive, and that?
That I don't know. To be fair, I haven't thought through that enough, and I don't know. You certainly the viewers would probably look at that more carefully. I don't know. But I'm just intrigued. I'm happy that she's back.
Because I'm wondering what the science facility people said or did with Hopper. What did they say or do? So I was thinking maybe they're like, oh, just so you know, we got 11 back, and we're still gonna go back to our agreement of, none of this ever happened, and this is all just one big. There's a logical explanation for all of these weird things, and which I still have a hard time buying, that all of a sudden this entire city is just going to believe, oh, sorry, that kid that we found in the river, that wasn't actually Will Byers, and he's actually alive. He's the boy that came back to life, Harry Potter style. So I don't know if I buy that necessarily. Did you think that was believable, that they were able to cover it up that cleanly? It seems.
Well, this is not necessarily political, but I will rarely doubt people's ability towards willful ignorance.
Okay.
So, I mean, no, but I mean that could be sloppy writing, and there's always a balance between suspension of disbelief and, sloppy writing, but yeah.
Well, speaking of sloppy writing, the other major critique that I had for this show, plot-wise, and maybe I'm wondering if you agree or disagree, is the transformation of the boyfriend, Nancy's boyfriend, because he starts out being a total jerk face, and he gets into a fight with Jonathan, and then all of a sudden he just turns around and decides, you know what, I'm going to be a good person now, And I'm gonna, not only that, I'm gonna stand up to my buddies who've been egging me on and risking, becoming plugged as a total loser in front of all of the cool people. But no, I'm just gonna. That just seemed a little. I understand if they were trying to evolve this character to become a little bit more than just the bully, but it just seemed to happen so fast and was so forced that I just didn't believe. The entire time I was thinking that he had some sort of ulterior motive, because I just wasn't believing that this guy just would do a complete 180 so quickly.
Yeah, no, I at a minimum don't think that. Well, I agree that it was not as gradual as it could have been.
Not in a believable.
This was no Freaks and Geeks.
Yeah, not in a believable way.
Geeks, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay, but this was no Freaks and Geeks. However, they did make, if you look at it carefully, they did make a conscious attempt to distinguish him from the other ones of his friends, and he never specifically, except when he was really angry at her after the fact, he never specifically was an over-the-top bully jerk. And maybe you could make a criticism, or I used to make a criticism and say his friends were too like stock, like so evil that they were like, we are a contrast to you, so that's why we're here. And it was too easy. But to me, I could at least note the seeds of it, because you could see these other people who were obviously jerks, and he was an arrogant douchebag, but he wasn't. Except with the camera, which was horrible, but the camera could have obviously been explained by the jealousy and rivalry and all that. So yeah. But I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to shade it a little.
Do you have any other critiques about this show?
I think critiques. I mean, the last episode, you could say it was a slightly neat. I thought the episode, I'm sorry if I'm wrong. If episode 9 wasn't the bathtub, was episode 9 the bathtub?
Well, that would be episode 7. There's only 8 episodes.
Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Episode 7.
I was thinking teaching on a math major. Sorry, but it's okay. So yeah, I'm pretty sure episode 7 was the one that was the bathtub, which to me was the high water mark. It was
high water.
Yeah,
I see what you did there.
I actually what? No, I did not.
That's funny.
And this anyway. So no, that was tremendous because it put everyone in one place organically. Winona Ryder, it wasn't her fault. Like she was very good for what it was, but it was sort of because of the situation. One note, like my son, like yelling all the time, but in that her reaction to 11 and
that scene with her and 11.
It was such earned emotion.
Yeah.
When her and 11 and just you didn't realize. I mean, 11 did have Mike and did have the group, but there's something to be said for parents.
Yeah.
And so when she was there, and just the way you could just see, and you give newfound appreciation not just for what 11 was missing, but for what the passion. The value of Winona Ryder's passion as a mother, because for so long it was just coming off as like, one note and frustrating, but to see that same passion channeled into something that was totally necessary and maternal, like it was beautiful.
Yeah, the scene with 11 and Joyce was one of my favorites in the entire Sire season, personally.
Yeah.
Who would you say is your favorite character?
Oh, I got this. Dustin.
Why is that?
I mean, well, okay. What I was going to say, I was going to slightly hedge on Dustin and say that he's simpler than I would normally do, and I usually tend towards somewhat darker characters. But he was because he was great. He was the by far the funniest, the most quotable, but completely believable. The actor inhabited, and you did. I'm not positive on this, but when I went on YouTube to look up interviews, which there's actually surprisingly few considering the popularity of the series, his interviews had the most views. Not that popularity is indicative of quality, but he's just a very charismatic personality, but written incredibly well. And beyond the pitch perfect comedic timing, the thing, if you would ever say he's totally simple, a way you can counteract that is the episode when they're talking about best friends, and who's his best friend. He is sort of talking through Mike the whole situation. It's so mature and it's so mature and like wiser beyond his years, and not what you would normally see. And to give a high praise, Freaks and Geeks worthy. So I won't do as good a delivery as Dustin, but when Dustin says, we wouldn't have messed with you if you knew you had superpowers.
Yeah, yes.
Like, which is a great line to begin with, and so like indicative of the character, because he's witty, but he's actually saying true things, and he's breaking tension in the group. But he's commanding, like
he's the voice of reason.
He is,
which I liked a lot.
Yes, but not.
He was the mediator. Everybody loves the mediator. And then how about 11?
Oh yeah, but 11 is tremendous. The actress who plays her is like nothing like you see in the interviews, and I really, in the future, I want to do an interview right after I see it, so I can have command of all the parts. But just her facial expressions throughout, and just the little wiggles of her eyebrows, and the few words that she has, that she's able to sell them with such power. I mean, it's an Emmy bait role, because you don't say a lot, and so, but still, it could be done over the top or annoying or mannered, and it's not at all. It's completely convincing.
My favorite character, I think my favorite character was probably Joyce, honestly. Even though I know she's like a one-note character, but I don't know. I'm a sucker for the maternal, Then obviously, when Will was missing, I mean, I felt for her and her desperation, and everybody calling her crazy. I mean, that must have been like, she was aware that she's sounding crazy, but she's insisting that she's not insane, and just all of the. Well, she had some really cool scenes, trying to contact Will with, the letters. I mean, the letters with the Christmas lights, and the Christmas lights are probably the most iconic in the series, and that all revolved around Joyce. And there's an admiration for her, like, she's not a cop, so she doesn't have like the combat skills. Even Nancy and Jonathan end up pulling up their sleeves and went all Rambo with the monster. So but she still fought in her own way against all odds, especially with everybody, like I said, like marking her as a crazy person, and even refusing to go to her own son's wedding. I mean, no son's wedding, her own son's funeral, her own son's wedding, her own son's that's completely different
Season 37.
Yeah, there you go. So I really liked her character. I think I just related to her character the most. So.
I mean, I personally would never say that for me, but I do find that the fact that she didn't have as many things at her disposal as Hopper, and her, she was being a mom. Points. Yeah.
She was being a mom, and she was being a very believable mom. And I mean, I have a soft spot for the Byers family in general, because the relationship between Jonathan and Will, even though you don't get to see them interact at all until the very end, but just leading up with all the flashbacks.
But their scene in the bedroom with the clash was great.
Yeah. Everything that happened between the two of them, like I love, having a brother myself. I love those kind of scenes in these shows, like in Big Hero 6, for example, like all of the stuff between the brothers in there. So,
if Goonies and Stand By Me are the touchstones that they used, and other sort of John Carpenter things, but those are primarily cited both by the authors and just you can see it. I think one thing that they did, which was wonderful, was the perfect balance of profanity, because as an English teacher, not that I delve into this specifically in class. I mean, it's kind of alluded to, but I'm not going to get into too much and not saying the profanity for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as a kid, what drove me nuts, among many other things, about okay, some TGIF shows, and I'm sorry,
Okay.
but like Full House or even like Family Matters or whatever. And that's not that I didn't like elements of Family Matters and whatnot, but that whole sort of type of show was this was not the experience of my adolescence or anyone that I had known, and
Mm-hmm.
it did not reflect what actually that age spoke like and did.
Mm-hmm.
And even my dad, like in the Wonder Years, which is not in that genre entirely, but they had a degree of that, and that was so. As a person who cares about language, it was so exciting and real to me.
Mm-hmm.
And in Stranger Things, the first opening poker scene when
D&D? D&D
so,
poker.
oh my god,
Colin got to get knee deep into D&D for the first time. Tabletop gaming was very proud.
well, yes, that's mostly true. Yeah,
Or poker.
yeah, or poker. I say you can edit that out. Anytime they ever say that, they don't edit it out, so that's fine. You can keep it in. But no, so the D&D. I mean, the opening, literally the very opening scene when they have
Right.
the shot of the elevator was wonderful, and then it ends up being the sprinkler, which you could say is a little too cute, but I'm all for it. And then they go into the not poker, the D&D thing,
Yes.
which was wonderful on every level. Like
Yeah.
it was arresting from the. I think I told Hark in Memphis. I said that was the best like first opening thing. I immediately want to watch this, and a large degree of it was knowing the D&D. Even though I didn't know D&D, just like you don't need to know the '80s movies. Seeing the D&D in all of its all of the specific references that you don't need to appreciate to know them to even appreciate, but it had just enough profanity that each word landed as like, oh, kids are saying this, but it's also like, yeah, kids say this.
Kids say this.
And,
even back in the 80s.
Yes, and they're doing it to a degree because they're all tough and badass and like, look at me.
Yeah, the geeky nerds.
Yeah, or just and I vividly remember like. In fifth grade, like they're a little bit older, but still being like on the soccer field, like I was like, and I was like, oh, look at me, I'm so special.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but to go back to Goonies and Stand By Me, in Goonies, it was, I think it was like a record at that time for shits or whatever, and that was. I mean, I guess it fit them being like just sort of immature and like, but it was a less serious movie. And in Stand By Me, you could argue that it was fitting because they were more rebellious and whatever. But you could at minimum say it was too much or it was over the top or it diminished the power of when they used it.
Right.
Kids having used it. Whereas this is a perfect balance.
Perfect balance.
And they actually paid attention to individual kids who used it.
Mm-hmm.
So Dustin, more, colorful, loud,
he uses it more.
And Lucas, who's just volatile, and so he's using it, but it's not like, oh, Mike is so good. It just doesn't really fit him more. But he does at times. He does. It's appropriate. Right. And right. Will does too in the first, like before he goes away.
Right, he does.
And 11, well, I was going to say 11 doesn't, but I almost referenced this yesterday. With the mouth breather, even 11, when she picks up mouth breather and in the frozen section, she's and it's a good show.
So let's last thing I want to close with is the final scene. The final scene
mm-hmm.
of with Will in the bathroom. What do you think that means? What do you think that's implying there?
It's not over.
Well, yes. Clearly something is inside Will. I don't know if it's growing like Alien mm-hmm. growing, which I would hate for that to happen. I mean, I would hate for a fate similar to Alien to happen to Will, especially since we went through all that trouble to rescue him in the first place.
Yeah.
But, like, do you think that Will now has the ability to travel to the Upside Down all by himself? Do you think that's what's happening? Or do you think he has the ability to see but not actually physically go to the Upside Down? That's one of the that's two ways that I think.
I think those are both plausible. And I think if we're continue these things, in full disclosure, maybe that's what you're talking about when you said, sci-fi is not necessarily your genre. I semi-purposely, semi-just naturally, for someone who loves and revels in and looks for details and gets frustrated if those can't be, noticed or remembered. When it comes to the practical, like this, the sci-fi elements or some mythology or the minutia of the actual like science elements of it, that I just don't notice or don't really seek out that much. And in some ways, a protective thing, because I know many shows, starting with Alias, where they get so bogged down on that people drive nuts or Lost. When so many people got frustrated with Lost, I was like, oh, I don't really. It's fine with me because I don't really. That doesn't matter to me as much as the characters and the filmmaking, the acting, the story, the dialogue, is much more what drives me than
the science
than
or the explanations.
Than plot machinations. That I don't really.
Fair enough.
But I'm not. But it's great if you like that. I mean, some people I don't care the way the shot looks. Like whatever.
I just care that it makes sense.
Exactly.
You know what I'm
exactly.
saying?
And so I'm able to enjoy shows even if
it doesn't make sense.
Or if it really doesn't, I'll be like, what? Or that'll annoy me. But yeah.
Or what are your predictions for season 2 in general?
When it was on, this is funny because when it was on, I was kind of like, oh, this will be great as a one-time thing, but it's going to get old. Or maybe I've just been bitter because I have so many shows that happens with. But now I am genuinely psyched. Even from the chapter titles, like a lot of your viewers probably have seen, they released like a trailer where it has the chapter titles and the new sound. And I would say it's, as someone who's seen lots of series, like I'd say it's 50-50. No, I think it's better than 50-50. Season 2s, which improve versus sophomore slump. And I just, by listening to interviews with the creators, I think they can build on it. And so one specific way I think they'll build on it, and they've literally said, is they're going to focus on deepening and deepening the story and the characters, and not as much on the homages and the period pieces. And so
what are you hoping to see in season 2, or see more of in season or just in general, what are you hoping to see in season 2?
I'm looking to to get specific, I think what they'll be able to do to address your thing about Steve and him being
the boyfriend.
Steve, and so what I mean is that they're not going to have to create we're having this, John Hughes bully who goes through a metamorphosis, and we have to check off that box and check off that box. Not that they were explicitly doing that, but like they're sort of, their origin story is done. It can be, Batman Begins to Dark Knight. Ooh.
Oh, there we go.
Batman Begins to Dark Knight, because Batman Begins was a great movie.
Right.
But Dark Knight, clearly. And so that's all I can say about it, or at least at that point.
I would love to dig deeper in some of the existing characters. For example, I would love to actually see, you got to hear her on the phone, but I'd like to actually see Hopper's ex-wife and see her with her new husband or her new beau, and see what's going on with that. I would like to see a little bit more. I'd like to see more about Will, really, because I mean, the entire season was revolved around him, but you get some flashbacks of him. But I really would like to see Will's character on screen more. Obviously, because based on the final scene, it looks like a good chunk of the next season is going to be revolving around him again. But I'd like to, I'd want to get to know more about Will, the kid, more than just Will, the person that we're trying to rescue, or Will, the person that's doing all these freaky upside down things. Obviously, I want to see 11 come back. If they do bring back Barb, which I think has been confirmed. Well, sorry for the spoilers, but I'd like to see in what way, in what fashion. And hopefully her and Mike can go to the snowball together. That would be really nice, or something. But also I do want to see what goes on. What I don't want to see, maybe this is another one, is I don't want to see another like overdone love triangle thing going on between Nancy, Steve, and Jonathan. Like she needs to make. I think she needs to make a decision. Obviously, I'm rooting for Jonathan because I think she and Jonathan, like I think that they work better together than Nancy and Steve. Maybe it's just I'm just being partial because Jonathan is the kind of person that you tend to root for in these things. But I don't want it to be this elongated. Oh, is she finally gonna make a decision? Is she gonna be with Jonathan or she? Which is not what I hope. I don't think they're gonna do that because that's not what this show is really about. It's not about a love triangle, but I hope they don't go that route anyway. And even if they did, I hope it doesn't last for very long and just resolved itself and you can move on. And then I'd like to learn a little bit more about. I want to see Dustin's family. I want to see Lucas's family. You got to see the parents of Mike and you got to see the parents of Will, but you don't really know much about what's going on with Dustin and Lucas. Like maybe there's some things going on at home that is not so perfect for them, and of course that's always room for more stories. So those are learning more about different people's backstories was something I really want to see for next season.
I definitely agree that having a endless love triangle for the first time in television history, it would not be good.
Yeah.
On this, I did like, not because I think Steve is better as a person, but I kind of liked the fact that she ended up with Steve because. And I wonder if you would have, because
it
if
wouldn't have been cliche.
Correct. It would have been yes.
Fair enough.
And it was more realistic for who she was as a person, as a girl who was at that age.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
That's fair enough.
And so even before you said it, I was like, oh my God, I finished this commentary and I didn't say Mike. It also just occurred to me, my name is also Mike, technically. But Mike was great. And full disclosure, I guess, I'm partial to those types. Gordy in Stand By Me, and I've probably the character I relate to more than any character in anything I've ever seen in my entire life is Kevin Arnold from the Wonder Years, and that sort of.
You like the good kid? Is that?
Well, yeah. To quote Sister Hazel, any single person on YouTube knows there's just no Sister Hazel. Hats off to you, because I'm not saying Sister Hazel's great, but one of my life things for at least 4 years of college and before then was I want to fall out of in between. That's a line from a Sister Hazel song. I want to fall out in between.
Okay.
And so I relate to characters who are sort of likable. Edgy and straight edge and likable, but have both elements and can sometimes feel lost in the shuffle. But that being said, I just think Mike was really well done too.
Yeah.
And not just I brought the profanity point, but and this maybe was cliche, but the back and forth between him and 11, I mean, it was well done and convincing. And the moment when this is just comic, but like the moment when 11 comes down and accidentally doesn't know, and just it's almost slapstick, but he goes and then he flips out. Like, I just thought Mike, beyond my personal bias, was a really a strong, if traditional but strong central focal point or entry point to the characters in the show.
The only thing with Mike, and this isn't about his character at all, it's more of the writing is I don't know, I kind of felt that him ending up liking 11, like the romance subplot between them, was a little cliche, or at minimum super predictable, really, really predictable. So I mean, I was fine with it. I mean, it's cute. I mean, I think fans wanted Mike and 11 to be shipped. To be a thing. But I the part of me is like, I've seen this before. Sure, I can see it again, but it would have been nice if there was something they could have done differently. But
I don't. I mean, I get what you're saying. That's what people like, falling in like a crush is kind of so basic and elemental, but I would different things. So it's not purely a maybe spin that hadn't thought of is it's a perfect transition to the next series, but more importantly, of the time in their life. So they're in a very non-teenage thing, and this is their transition.
And the way they acted it out was actually very believable and very realistic. The way that the kiss happened, I thought, was well executed. I'd be like, yeah, that totally would actually happen in real life. So I still want them to be able to go to the snowball.
See, that's funny. That I didn't. If anything was going to be cliche, like no, I'm glad and I kind of wanted to, but that was more. Yeah, but it was nice, kind of. I guess Back to the Future. It reminded me of that the thing. But the last. Oh, but this is also just funny when him and his sister back and forth like. 11. What are you talking about? I don't like 11.
Oh, yeah.
I don't like Steve.
You like Jonathan?
What? No.
Or like, I like Jonathan.
See, that's why to me I like that more. Like that was.
I like that exchange.
Yeah, that was annoying. Like that was sort of making fun of it.
Yes.
And it wasn't just a cliche. Like it's sort of mocking, lovingly mocking, like that sort of it being a thing. Yeah. You know. So.
Yeah. All right. Well. I think that's about it. So.
And I want to say thank you for inviting me because I honestly, and this will probably be a theme, a lot of times if I'm recording these things, I'm like, I'm so tired.
Yeah, Colin was a little. We're doing this pretty late at night, so I apologize that Colin's.
And I hadn't seen it in a while, so I wasn't on command. I didn't
even
remember Lucas's name for a minute. But this is engaging and
because you wanted to be a critic, you wanted to be doing these reviews. You can still you can still live vicariously through these videos.
And if you made it through the entire thing, I appreciate you too, because there are people that do it. I do it too with AV Club interviews. So, congrats.
Thank you guys for watching, and until next time, love yourselves and love each other.